Iqbal, question
Matt,
for you. How closely do you follow your prioritization system?
good question. This actually came up on LinkedIn the other day, and it was kind of like, they said, "Oh, we don't follow our prioritization system. We've got these tests and they're prioritized, but we don't pick them up in order." The thing about prioritization, and by the way, prioritization matrix, all they are really is just like a prioritization matrices. So whether it's Pi or whether it's PXL, you have tests and you have some criteria by which you score those tests. And to me, the way that prioritization frameworks are most useful are in the way that they describe experiments rather than the score that you get at the end. So I don't necessarily take them, develop them in the order that they're scored. I kind of use them as a way to kind of describe the experiments and then make a call based on that. What about you? What do you follow that, or?
Generally the same. I'd say for my work, I do have prioritization, but the prioritization is based off of input data at the time of like idea creation. Like when you're actually far enough along that like you have a solidified idea where you have enough data points that like you can enter it into the idea list. Well, the nature of like the ingestion system that I have set up requires you to fill out like XYZ data points. Otherwise you don't have, like, that's sort of like a first line filter for deciding like, well, is this idea even have enough substance to begin with? And the nature of that input automatically generates all the information needed to do the prioritization that I utilize, because I'm not dealing with hundreds of different ideas coming in. I'm not working in a giant big enterprise organization, right? I'm an independent consultant working in small mid-sized e-com, so we have 10 to 30-ish ideas bubbling around at a time, so it's not that hard to like look through them and decide which one's going to be going next, right?
But you do have a prioritization framework.
Correct. Yes. And it's sort of like ask some basic questions, yes or no, 1 point for yes, 0 points for no, or something. There's some weighting involved beyond that, but it's a very basic of like, sort through it to sort of decide what's going to happen next, but not like specifically follow that order up. Like whatever's the highest score has to be done next is not always the case.
And do you review your prioritization matrix on a regular basis for like new criteria that you might want to add?
So for me, not really, but that's because I've been working long enough where the system that I've developed, I've worked I've more or less worked the kinks out over the course of, building it for like 10 years and stuff. Like I'll make tweaks here and there, like, some new process comes in or something like that. But in general, for me, no. But again, that's more due to longevity of experience. I would say someone that's just coming in or building a new team or, coming in and setting up a new program, they would probably want to audit their prioritization much more heavily, because there's two traps you can fall into there. Of if you have your prioritization, if you have some sort of system set up and you're not utilizing it, well, then either A, you're wasting effort in working on that system, like collecting the data and running the prioritization, or B, you need the prioritization and it's not being utilized correctly, which means there's gaps there and you need to like rethink how the prioritization system is working.
Yeah, and I often find that there are occasions when you do need to review your prioritization matrix, like there'll be change in the business goals and stuff like that, when maybe you got like change in senior management or a slight shift in the business, or like even a shift in the problem scape of your application. So you discovered that there's a particular problem around these certain areas of your site, in which case you do need to maybe sometimes add new criteria in order to better sort of describe the tests and better kind of pick the tests that are going to have the best impact or the biggest impact for your company at that particular moment in time.
Yeah,
So,
or in your system to be more malleable, like rather than asking like, will this test improve this specific goal? Maybe the question should be changed to, will this test improve our current North Star metric or something like that, right? Like you're changing the structure to make it more adaptable rather than rigid.
yeah, and again, it's kind of, and the reason why I like to use them as describers is even if your company isn't changing, or even if you're not shifting priorities or whatever, we've had occasions where I remember in the past when I was like heavily doing development, in that maybe there's some experiments that were blocked, and then when these experiments were blocked, it was really easy to look into the backlog and find an experiment that's got a high E-score and kind of go, well, that's a test I can develop while I've got some downtime. And then it keeps that velocity high up while, you're able to pick out tests that are still worth doing. So,
That's actually a really good point, and that's something I've done quite a bit too, without even realizing. It's like sometimes you have a big complex test with a lot of moving parts that you're working on that needs like multiple people sign off or something, but then there's like and that's sort of gunking up the works of like all of our energy is being devoted to this other test and other ones are wrapping up in the meantime. So yeah, go in and find something like, oh yeah, I could knock this one out in like an hour and we can get it live and running, and there's no reason not to do it or something right like that. Yeah. So right, yeah, you're like contextually prioritizing on different criteria depending on current context.
Yeah, and to take things further with that example specifically, if say for instance for E-score, you could even split that in terms of, well, these tests are UX only, these tests are API driven, backend driven, or whatever. So then that way, if for instance, if there's a code freeze and you're not able to work in specific areas, but you're able to work in on the front end, on the UX with like simple front end changes, then that's something that you can still work on, that you can find easily. Again, I go back to this whole thing of like prioritization matrices. For me, the biggest use for them are a way to describe tests, and are a way to
They're really like
identify
just a way to more robustly collect metadata about your tests.
Yeah, metadata about your test, and also just to keep a velocity momentum going, and also at the same time to kind of keep maintain the focus on the goals, whatever the goals are for business, or KPIs or whatever. So yeah.
I suppose you could almost even flip that, in that if you're collecting good metadata about your tests, it's easier to prioritize because you have a robust amount of information available to you to add or remove from prioritization as needed.
Yeah. So in general, I'd say keep an eye on those. Treat it as a way of defining or describing your tests, and always use a framework, but always add your own criteria.
Perfect.
Cool.
All right. Catch you next time.